Welcome to another Conversation with Giants episode. Today I have a big giant in the building, Mr. Paul Onwuanibe. Thank you for being on the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, Mr. Paul is the MD CEO of Landmark Group. Landmark Group, he will tell you himself, is a leading real estate hospitality group in Nigeria, and they've done amazing things to open up this sector. So today we're going to be having a conversation with him, some insights as to his background, how he did it, where he is so far, what are the challenges, and what does the future hold. So thank you so much for having us. We just want to know a little bit about yourself, your background. I know you are a British-trained businessman who moved back to Nigeria a couple of years ago or decades ago and made some major strides. So people would like to know a little bit about you, your background, and Landmark.
Yeah, Tola, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so as you said, Paul Onwuanibe, founder, chief executive of Landmark Group. It's interesting. A lot of people say, "Oh, I came back home," right? But I have sort of a mixed upbringing in that. Yes, I was born in London, did my foundation education in London, but my father sent me to Nigeria at the age of 10.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was a diplomat, and he didn't want us to grow up in England without understanding Nigeria. At the age of 10, yeah, I went to Federal Government College, Lagos. Okay. And over the next 5 years, I met some incredible people who are my very good friends today. And obviously after secondary school, I went back to the UK, did my A-levels, but I came back to Nigeria for my first degree in architecture.
Really?
Yeah.
What university was that?
University of Nigeria.
Okay,
yeah.
In Nsukka.
Nsukka, yeah.
I see.
So I took JAM without my parents even knowing, because I was going to come back to Nigeria after secondary school, all my friends. Okay. And I didn't know what Houston. Yeah, I chose University of Nigeria because it had the name Nigeria in it. So I didn't know anything else. So I went architecture because it mixed with the subjects I knew the best, right? So it was maths, physics, geography. I was very good in those subjects. And then after that, I went back to the UK, did a master's in construction management and an MBA at the London Business School. Okay. And following that, I started working in an architecture practice. Okay. And then from there, I went on to work with a property development company, construction company, and then I walked into Regis, which at the time was a pioneer company. And then was interested. I went to work with a guy called Mark Dixon. Okay. I met him literally at the Waterloo train terminal. We were the construction company doing it, and he was waiting for a train. We were having a coffee, and he said he was trying to start a business that would change the way the world worked. And it was a big risk because I was leaving a real formal job for an entrepreneurial job. Yeah. But I tell this story because that was the turning point in my life. In that at that young age, I started working for an entrepreneur, and I looked at the way decisions were made. Yeah. I looked at the way this guy rolled the dice every day. Yeah. Right. It was bold, it was brave, and it was pioneering. Yeah. And basically, he wanted to just change the way people worked. Traditionally, offices, you had to rent an office, furnish it, fit it out, kit it, put your technology in, and hope your business works. And what he did was create an office hotel. Effectively, you could rent it for the hour, week, month, year. And that business over the next 7 years grew into a business that operated in 67 countries. So I was in charge of property and logistics in that business. He had sold his father's bakery and started this business with 200,000 euros. Wow. Yeah. And 7 years later, it was floated on the New York Stock Exchange for $4 billion.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that was that transformation. I saw it from the beginning to the end. And believe me, when you have to roll the dice, you have to roll the dice. But business is never about smooth sailing paths and normality. It's always about difficulties and resilience and that adaptability and change. Absolutely. And there are just so many things involved. So that really molded me. And after the flotation, I felt my job was done there, and I set up Landmark. Okay. And that Landmark business, I started in London in the UK and worked throughout Europe, opened in 7 different places in Europe, including the normal places, Brussels, Paris, Geneva, Frankfurt, and then went to New York until 2001. The 2001 disaster in World Trade Center affected our business. And at that time, I thought to myself, it's time for Africa. So that was the turning point. In 2003, I came to Africa, but I didn't want a Nigeria business. And I was coming back after such a long time. I wanted an Africa business, and I had watched the way Regis had developed, and I learned a lot from that. So I decided to simultaneously open up in 4 countries. Okay. So I did Johannesburg for the south, Nairobi for the east, Lagos for the west, and Cairo for the north. Okay. And then over the next, 15 years, we started infilling opened up in 19 different countries. 19 different cities, 40 countries in Africa. Sold that business in 2015 to focus on Nigeria, or on West Africa.
Okay.
So that's a sort of nutshell of that journey.
That's very interesting. So 2015, the Landmark business evolved to what it is today. You sold the original business, and then you started something else in 2015, but you still retained the name Landmark.
Yes. So because I was running a service office business across these multiple countries in Africa, I realized, 3-4 years in, by 2006, 2007, we realized that to run a service in Africa where you don't control the property, there's so many difficulties. So, business is about evolving and adaptability. So we decided to get into property development, and because I was an architect, I'd done property development and construction management, and I'd watched how businesses evolved. I wanted to evolve, so we bought landed properties in Johannesburg, in Nairobi, in Lagos, and we couldn't buy in Cairo, but I bought in Libya at the time. Yeah. And that was as early as in Lagos. We bought this property in 2006. In Nairobi, I think it was 2009. In Joburg, it was 2008. And in Libya, it was 2010, just before the war. Yeah. The war broke out the year later in 2011. And the idea was, as Africa was evolving, I wanted to build mixed-use communities. Africa was unique. It was very different from all the countries I'd worked in. I'd gone to these 6-7 countries and we just opened offices. And the one thing about Africa is that the conveniences were inconvenient. To go somewhere took time. The transportation systems were not defined. The legal systems were not solid. The human resource systems, you had to really look. Everybody was sort of good, happy, and hardworking, but not everybody was equipped with the tools to do the things that you needed to do, because Africa was not really an exposed continent. People don't travel out of Africa a lot, right? And the people who travel out of Africa are usually running their own businesses. They're not available for employment. So I realized that we needed to find a way to sort this out. And my mom used to tell me when I was young that put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket carefully. A lot of people say, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Yeah, she was
fair enough.
So that's what I did with Landmark. And I thought, let's try to bring everything together so we can get efficiencies in the system and create these unique mixed-use environments. And there's a big story on how I chose the locations. But that's when Landmark transitioned from a serviced office company into a property development company sometime between 2006 and 2009. But we didn't have the funds to start building elaborately until after 2009, 2010. And 2015, I found that I couldn't concentrate on the two businesses. They were both Landmark. Well, one was Landmark Serviced Offices, the other was Landmark Property Development Company. So I decided to focus on the property development company. So you see that even in this place where we are today, the bulk of the development and construction took place post 2011. And it was fairly aggressive.
I was going to say, because in 2013, I came to Landmark. This same location. It was a tent.
A white tent.
It was a white tent, and I did my mom's 60th birthday there, right? And looking 12, 13 years later, right, to see how it has evolved and how it has been able to develop, people get confused when they want to put in one word, what does Paul do? Is it real estate? Is it hospitality? So there's been several waves of how the business has emerged, and what we've done, and the way the interview has been carefully selected. We have a mixed questions around the real estate and around hospitality, because today you redefined, and I'm going to go to my first question. Landmark has really, really changed how hospitality has evolved over the last decade in Nigeria. Was that the vision from the beginning? Did it just happen because the real estate was there, the opportunity was there, or was it something you thought about and you went straight into taking that risk?
So so vision is the art of seeing things that other people haven't seen, right? And when you're lucky, most of us have vision at night in our dreams, and then we wake up and we get into the rat race, right? But I developed this habit, and I learned that from Mark Dixon, is that when you have these brain waves,
write it down.
Write it down and explore it in your mind when you're awake, not when you're sleeping, right? And I kept on doing that. And I remember when I said there was a big backstory when I looked at the cities in Africa to go in. So I did some research. I think reality was, Africa was a collection of 52 countries, but the reality is 80% of Africa were 4 countries, right? And from population, GDP, landmass, anything you want to look at, right?
Correct.
If you want to be Pan-African, you don't need to, at that time, you didn't need to go further than 4 countries. And those are the 4 countries I chose. Now, when you choose a country, then you have to choose a city. Yeah. When you choose a city, you have to choose a location, especially if you're trying to do a mixed use development. And mixed use is everything from leisure, it's business, leisure, and lifestyle, right? And you need certain things around you, right? So I took a helicopter ride in each of these cities.
Okay.
I just looked at the cities from above. And that's when you try it. Look at Google Earth.
Different level of imagination. Right?
It's just a different, you're looking at it from the ground and looking at it from the sky are 2 different things, right? So I looked at it from above. And I remember flying over along the coastline, and there was the bustling business district of Victoria Island, right? Because Victoria Island had just turned commercial. All the banks were there and stuff. And there was this growing Lekki residential corridor that had just started. And, they'd done a 2-lane road. And there was this place in between. There was nothing. It was marshland.
Nothing happening.
Yeah. And I kept on asking, what's this place? And they say it's Morocco. I said, what does that mean? I mean, look at all the people here. Look at where people are going, right? And right in between, there's nothing. So I said, land this helicopter. Let's see what it is, right? So it came down, and there were, it was a mess. It was marshland. There was illegal communities living here. There was just nothing here. No roads, no electricity, no support infrastructure. And I said, that's where I want. Because, they say something in development. They say, find out where the people are going and get there first, right? So I thought, this was the ideal place to do what we wanted to do. I saw it was close to where I needed to be, the residential community, the business community. There was water on one side, and you could see where the road network would go, right? And that was that literally was the backstory behind choosing this. And, I have the same story for Joburg. I chose a place in Santon City where they later came to build the American Embassy and the major flagship Apple store. And they called it number 1 Santon Drive. The story is, I was there first, right? Yeah. But we ended up being there at the same time. Same thing for Nairobi as well. And the same thing in Libya. In Libya, we chose the former American Embassy. So during the war, it then got leveled.
So You've done this in all these cities. We're in Lagos now. Lagos today is one of the cities that you're in. And Landmark has made a major statement here as far as what prime real estate should look like, what hospitality should look like. What is your take on Lagos as far as its position? Is it a role model city? In terms of its urban nature, the demography of people, people's ability to spend. Has Lagos reached its potential? What is your take on Lagos as a city today?
It's an interesting question. And, Lagos is about perspectives, right? So it depends on how you look at Lagos. And the truth is, I often say people, look, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So they're extremes. And it just depends on what you want to do, how you do it, and how long you do it for. But there's no doubt about it. Fundamentals in Lagos are very strong, right? And for obvious reasons. I don't necessarily need to recount them, but the obvious reasons. But, I'll tell you a very quick story. I remember speaking to a journalist who was coming to Lagos for the first time in the UK. And that was my early days in Nigeria. And they were asking, it was a British guy, never been to Africa, never been to West Africa. I was asking, what's the expect and stuff. And all the people he was speaking to were saying, don't go there, right? And it was terrible. It was frightened to death. And I said, no, it's not like that. You just need to pretend to be Nigeria when you come. So anyway, he came over, I took him round, and he spent 6 days in Lagos. He had an absolutely fabulous time, right? I went to so many different places, restaurants, went to different businesses. I introduced him to a lot of people. And he had a great time, right? It's all about context. But he did have some issues, especially, of course, going out of the airport and coming in. Yeah. Then, we're talking, this was, I think, 2010, 11, when the airport was a real mess, right? And, he got back and wrote this article. And it stuck with me and said, Lagos is never as bad as people tell you before you get there, right? But it's never as good as the locations think. Right? It's not as good as the right thing. So it's basically somewhere in between. Yeah. So I say Lagos is a work in progress city. Is it great? No, it's not. Is it awful? Absolutely not. But it depends on what you make of Lagos. It has the people, it has the energy, it has the potential in terms of buying power. It has the supply chain because of the ports and the airports, and it has a mixture of of different nationalities, different cultures, different religions. So it has all the things that make big cities great. Yes, and we can think of several of them. But is it an actual blueprint for how a city should be? No, it's not. But it can get there.
Yeah.
What Lagos needs is a bit more authenticity and transparency. And I think you get those two things in Lagos. We can begin to get imaginative about where the city can go to.
Yeah. So in 2012, I started my own hospitality business 13, 14 years ago now. And our first location choice was Victoria Island at the time. That was the only part of Lagos that seemed to have any kind of commercial attraction. All the banks were there and all the insurance companies and all the corporates were there. So we located our first outlet there. And part of our expansion plan was to go into some of the more attractive cities across the country. And we then expanded to Abuja and then went to Calabar. And our fourth location was Landmark, right? And I remember then the same place I came in 2013, I was coming back to in 2016. And I'd seen this evolution, this blueprint. At the time, it was Hard Rock. Hard Rock had come and just showed up. And then this boulevard was built out. And then we came in at the same time as Film House when they came in. And it was very exciting because of the vision. And I remember then sitting with you and a few other people, tell me about, your plan. Is a retail boulevard coming. I can see it's under construction. The Gucci stores, the Louis Vuitton stores. And then I was told about the beach and the entire plan. So can you tell the people a little bit about how from 2016, the boulevard was developed onto the beach and, what has happened so far?
Yeah. So it's a year before, 2015. 2015, I raised $100 million.
Okay.
And the whole idea was to make this the number one destination in Africa. And to do that, I felt there were three things you needed to do. One is you needed people. And two is you needed activity, right? And three is you needed service, right? But you needed to be able to execute it. So the first thing I did was take my entire team to Dubai. Okay. I remember I took 128 people.
Really?
Yeah, your brother-in-law would tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everyone went to Dubai.
I chartered a jet. I chartered a hotel in Dubai.
Yeah.
Right?
Jumeirah?
Jumeirah, yes.
Jumeirah Beach.
Yeah. Jumeirah Beach. The JA Hotel. So 5-star hotel.
Yeah.
And took everybody there. I took everybody, cleaners, drivers, middle management, senior management, absolutely everybody. We literally turned the lights off here, right? But, it's literally just event center, turn off.
Yeah.
And the idea was to just immerse everybody in what a destination looks like.
A vision.
A vision. Because, you can't teach a blind man a color. So the color red, for instance, he's never seen it before, he can't explain it.
Yeah.
Right? And I realized that in just telling my team and trying to coach them what I needed,
they'll never get it.
Couldn't get it.
Yeah.
With all the best will in the world. But, they were passionate and hardworking, but they just couldn't get it. So I thought, I'll bite the bullet. It cost us an absolute bomb, absolute bomb. But it was worth it, every penny. Flew them over. We spent 9 days. 9 days, because we needed time. And I said, you're on holiday here. We're not working. We'll have a few sessions, but I just want you to immerse yourself in this place. Took them round. And, Dubai then was not Dubai today.
Yeah, it wasn't as developed, yeah.
Yes, but they're still moved several notches. And when we came back, we then set out to develop this business leisure lifestyle. So I shared the vision. I said, look, what we want to do is we want three things. One is bring as many people to this place as possible. Two is give them an amazing experience, right? To keep them here as long as possible.
Yeah.
And then three is make sure they're going to tell other people about us.
Yeah.
A simple strategy. It's not about real estate. It's not about hospitality. It's not about development. It's about people, right? And that's what you learn in Dubai. And if you've been to Singapore, those are the things you learn and you understand that's how to build the hospitality industry. Put everything in one place and just make sure people come and treat them well when they come. Yeah. Right? So that was the boundary we crossed. I had borrowed all this money as well. And we'd raised some investments and borrowed this money. So we then started developing the beach. and we did the event center, changed it from a tent to a thing. We brought the Hard Rock Cafe into Anchor, one end of it. We built this building and Knock Towers, and we had PwC as our client. And this was a sort of vertical expression of a mixed-use building. We had shops on the ground floor, apartments at the top, a hotel in between, and 4 office floors. And we just learned how to manage the different responsibilities in the building vertically, and then we had to translate that horizontally. The beach, we decided, because it was 1.2 kilometers long, so we decided to first of all do a broad walk. So one of the things, and I always say is when people talk about infrastructure development, people think it's about houses and shops and things. The first thing you want to do if you want a place to develop is build the road. Right?
Infrastructure. It's mainly infrastructure that can get people
there. Infrastructure that can get people there. And then, so we did that. We built a 1.2 kilometer broad walk. It was 4 meters wide, 1.2 kilometers long. Underneath that broad walk, we put the water, we put the sewage, we put the electricity, we put the fiber. So everything was there. So as we were developing the things, the activities and entertainment, it was very easy to
just plug and play, because all the pipes were ready there.
Absolutely. Yeah. We installed a water cleaning system because of all the plastics in Lagos. Everything was sort of floating here. So we got it from the Dutch.
Okay.
So they came here, cost us, I think it was about $700,000.
Yeah.
But it was worth it.
To clean up the water.
To clean up the water and clean up the sand. So it was like a net that was on the seabed, and it got rolled up every 6 weeks. So you rinse in plastics,
and then you get it out.
And you get it out, right? And then we got a machine from Gem that turned the sand. So because people thought, we imported the sand. There were all sorts of, but we didn't. It turned the sand to make it fine, so you could walk on it and no stones and things. And we learned all that in Dubai, by the way, right? And then we started creating experiences. And we said, well, the first thing, we had 80 different food and beverage vendors, but we made sure none of them sold the same things. So if there's jerk chicken at one end, and there's puff puff here, there's ice cream there, and there's traditional food here, and there's Western European food, and there's Chinese food. And we did that so everybody could come and you could pick what you wanted. Then we needed to put activities in, exciting activities. And we had a few more literally planned before the show stopped, right? But, it was good fun doing it. And what that did, it brought a lot of people here. It was the first inner city beach in Africa.
What was your highest number in terms of people who showed up to the beach on a Saturday, on a Sunday?
Over the Christmas period, we curated Christmas work. Yeah, people talk about Dirty December.
You started there.
You started there. But success has many fathers. Right. The failures are not one.
Exactly.
But on those days, so Boxing Day and the day after New Year's Day, the 2nd of January, were always traditionally the biggest numbers. We had 50, 60,000 people. Wow. There was a time on Boxing Day at 12 noon, we had to close the main gates of Landmark. I mean, everywhere was packed, and we started thinking it could get dangerous, right? We welcomed 4.5 million people every year. Yeah. And to put that into perspective, that's 15,000 people a day. Yeah. And not every day was busy.
Yeah.
Right. So the weekends were, Sunday was particularly the busy day. We had so many different events and things. People were coming from all over the world. So it was interesting. But what made it a kicker for the rest of Landmark is, and you would know this, right? We created the entrance at one end and the exit at the other end. So you had to walk the boulevard.
You had to walk
the
boulevard.
And you come out right at the end of the retail boulevard, where
my outlet
is. And then walk down.
Yeah.
So we created that, and it just created a real buzz here, right? So all the shops were busy. I remember the KFC guys telling me that per square meter, this was the highest football and revenue earning.
They were something else. They came after me, and their numbers were unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. So it was an interesting experience, and what it does, it just says, look, if you have a simple strategy that's focused on people, it basically works. And the truth is, if you've done it before, you can do it again. Yeah. And hopefully in a more efficient and a more effective way, because, I would say we obviously made some inefficient mistakes, but it was interesting doing it. It was a lovely journey.
How much support did you get from government? And people are under the impression that to do a project of this scale, you must have government patronage, you must have a silent government partner, you must have some kind of open check. How much? I know the answer. I know the answer to this question, but a lot of people don't know, because I know when we started, when I came in 2016, there were no roads.
Yeah, none.
And Landmark did the road several times. Tried to clean up the streets so it's motorable. until it was finally done. So, is this story real? Did you get a lot of support from government at the initial stages?
No, but
and is government important?
Yes.
When you're trying to do a business, I guess what I'm trying to say is how important is government for or against?
So government is
in ensuring that
in many ways, but it's important because society is made up of three things: the place, the people, and the governance, right? And there has to be a marrying meet somewhere. The truth is, opportunity only comes where those three sets of things, align.
Yeah.
Right. And Lagos has a lot of opportunities, so it will be fairly naive of me to say that the government was irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. In that you can't build something to the size that we built, the money we spent, and government's irrelevant. We need the permissions from the government to do the things. The government gave us all the permissions. We bought the land, from the government. I think we paid $17 million in 2006. So we got the permissions. The society provided the people, right? There's obviously emerging a lot of young people, and government patronized the place. They did the New Year's 2024. The president did the fireworks on this beach, right? So we had a lot of, I would say, direct support, right? But the opportunities were created by the three sets of people. Is there government ownership? Of course not. Was there government influence? No. But you have to navigate, especially during the COVID period. We built a COVID center.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, I remember there was an isolation center
because this whole
everything was shut down. That's my next. Landmark has gone through a few waves.
Yes.
And I was, as a tenant, I was here to experience it, and experience the comeback. Right, experience the struggle during the time. The pains. One wave I remember was COVID. There was NSAS. That was a big issue.
Yes, big issue. The Forex.
Yes.
The foreign exchange.
There was a foreign exchange crisis, and then Landmark beach crisis. In your own opinion, which of those crises was the worst?
So, it's a good question, but it's a difficult one because they all had different sorts of effects. But let me first of all say that it is impossible to run a business and not have major challenges. The reason why businesses are successful is because you have major challenges and you have to scale them. Yeah. Not everybody is equipped to do the hard things. We do things not because they're easy, but because they're difficult, right? So all the easy things have been done. So we've had many challenges in our business, and I can go back into Europe and the challenges we had in Europe. In America, the World Trade Center, we lost 7 people there.
Yeah,
we won the 77th floor when that building went down. And that was a challenge. That was a showstopper for our business there. We were not paid any compensation by the government. No insurance companies paid. We literally walked away with, I walked away with my life. 7 of my staff didn't. That was a major challenge.
And you weren't in the building though when it happened?
No, I was downstairs.
I don't understand. You were actually at the World Trade Center?
Yes. So I was staying at the Millennium Hilton.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you know the area.
Yeah.
Which is opposite or across the East-West Highway. And so I used to fly into New York for 1 week every month. And that was the week I flew in. And that was the day I flew in. So I got in the morning, went to the hotel, checked in and stuff. And I was coming across the highway when the first plane hit. So my building although it was Tower 1, but it was the second building that got hit. They call it Tower 2, right? Because it was the second one that got hit, but technically it was Tower 1. So the first plane got hit, but nobody knew it was a plane. They thought it was an explosion. It was, I think, 3 or 4 years earlier.
Something similar.
Something very similar in basements. So I continued to cross, but instead of going down to the Pelican Lights, which is about 200 meters away for safe crossing, I wanted to dash.
You went across,
straight across, right? So that took me a bit longer than it should have, right? Because, it was an 8-lane highway.
Yeah.
But I got across when the second plane came.
Yeah.
So I was going into the building, and because we were on the 72nd floor, there's the slow lift which stops on every floor, and then the fast elevators, which the first stop was 38th floor, the second stop was 70th floor. So there's only 2 stops before my floor, right? So, but that elevator was on the mezzanine level; it's not on the ground floor level, right? And there's security controls to get. So I was going through that when the second plane came. So look, if that was a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think of all the disasters I've had, that's probably the worst because people actually died. Yeah. The foreign exchange crisis was terrible, right? We borrowed $30 million in 2015 from an international bank to build the beach out, and that $30 million, it was 180 to 1. And 7 years later, when we're meant to pay back, it was 700 to 1. Now it's 1,500 to 1, right? So that itself was a business stopper, right? The COVID was a tough one, but what made it slightly more bearable was it was global, right? So everybody sort of understood. And we just decided to put commercial gains to the side and create the COVID centers, for the community. The beach demolition was a real tough one, obviously, because not only had we spent a lot of money and time and curated something that we thought was loved and was endearing to the community, we employed 4,000 people there.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of real people who were affected. And look, I'm not going to applaud or criticize anything here. If I was in government, maybe I would have made the same decision.
Yeah.
Who knows if there's a greater good thing there. That I had to call one by one. We had 436 contracts that I had to renegotiate and cancel. You think of the pain of all the, well, your businesses here. You think of the pain of all the businesses. So there's a lot to deal with. But like Edison said, he said, when his factory burnt and all his prototypes and all his inventions went down, and he said, disasters and opportunities to start again, but more intelligently.
Right.
So after you go through the sort of 5 stages of grief, you're in denial at first, and you're angry, then you start bargaining, then you realize that doesn't work, and then you're sad, and then you accept it at the end of the day. And once you accept it, and you have to make sure when you face disaster is to get through those 5 stages very quickly, because you can't cry and laugh at the same time. Yeah. Right. So you do your crying, you park it, and you say, how do I turn this disaster into an opportunity? And that's what we've been doing for the last year. We thought, well, we're going to geographically diversify. We're going to take the best parts of our business, which is the leisure and hospitality, and roll it out. We understand how it's done. We understand the model, we understand the power of numbers of people. We had a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy. Yeah. I kept saying to my team, we need to turn this sympathy into equity, right? Yeah. Because a lot of people fell for us. I had calls from different presidents. Yeah.
Governors.
Yeah, governors. Yeah. Everyone, the journey of the last year has been incredible. Very difficult, but we're used to doing difficult things. But incredible in that we really do have an opportunity to show that challenges are not showstoppers. Right. To rebuild, not just for our investors and for the community, but for also our team and our own sanity, to rebuild what has gone down. And we decided, to build it bigger and better. Yeah. So time will tell, but it's a journey that we're not shirking from.
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with you before and about what's next for Landmark and what's Landmark doing now. And I have 2 questions in one. One is, can what was built here in Lagos be done anywhere else in Nigeria outside of Lagos? I say this because I know Landmark is currently expanding, and I know something similar is being built in Enugu. I know this because as a business we are interested in growth, right? But tell us about the next journey for you. And Enugu is now on the map, is under construction. Can it be in Lagos? Can it be better? Of course, there's a lot more experience now, so you'll be a lot more efficient and a lot more detailed about what you want to do. But tell us a bit about that journey and if this concept can be replicated, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to come, they worry about scale, they worry about Nigeria has a good size, right? And I always say to people, 200 million, 250 million people, how many of them are your market? Right? How many of them can pay? Right? So don't be fooled about the numbers. Pure numbers. You have to really, really, understand what you're doing. And you've now, moved from the beach business has now moved from Lagos and is now under construction and a few other places that you've mapped out. What should we expect?
So same philosophy, right? Find a way to bring people somewhere. Yeah. Right? Give them an amazing experience, keep them there as long as possible, and make sure they have a great experience and they tell other people about it. So yes, Enugu, Port Harcourt, and Aba are all underway at the same time. Yeah. We decided that we were going to look for waterfront sites across the West African coast. Yeah. And water could be anything from a river, a lake, a sea, an ocean, a pond. Yeah.
As long as it's water.
As long as it's water, right? And we decided large scale developments. So it's 5 hectares plus. Mm-hmm. And then we will build out a whole series of food, beverage, and activity and experiential options. Enugu obviously is the first. Enugu and Port Harcourt are the first, by the way. But it's just that Port Harcourt was a complete bare piece of land with water on 3 sides. And that's a very interesting proposal. And so hopefully by next Christmas, you'll see something amazing there.
Amazing.
Enugu is a 216-room hotel that had been left to this, but it was a pride of Eastern Nigeria at the time. That's what we effectively bought a long-term lease there. For a 35-year.
You're now going to build around it.
We're building around the waterfront of it, and we're remodeling the hotel. So in that process now, and in this short time, and that was only five months ago, this short time we've hosted the MBA, NAFEST, Anglican Bishops Conference. There's several conferences. And then we can see the numbers already picking up. So you're right. Not many places have the same buying power as Lagos, yes? But there are many things in common. If you drop a pin in Enugu, right, and you say, I'm prepared to drive 2.5 hours in any direction, there are 50 million people, right? So that's a quarter of the country, right? Now, the issue is that what do you do? You know, a lot of people talk about luxury and exclusivity, and a lot of people sell that. You know, I don't. You know, and you know from even Landmark Beach, people thought there was luxury, so we said world-class standards, but with local content. So it's not luxury. Luxury for us is quality experience to the masses. Our average spend before the demolition of the beach, our average spend in Landmark was about $15. Yes, it was about 20 to 25,000.
So it's a volume.
Yeah. But if you have 4.5 million people spending $15 each, then you can do the numbers.
In business.
Right? So in all the locations we're looking for the numbers of people that can spend $10 at a sit-in. So commercially, if we'll get it right. You know, the difference between people like us in leisure and in the leisure part of real estate as opposed to the bricks and mortar part of real estate, our unit economics is people. It's not bricks and mortar. You know, when you speak to real estate guys, they're talking about square meterage. Or how what's the size of this, and that's what drives their cost. What drives me and drives our profitability is how many people come. We count everything in Landmark, as you know. We count the people that come through the gate. We count the cars that come through the gate. We have digital cameras that actually count everything. We don't count just when they come in and when they leave. We count where they go. So I know that, you know, 6,000 people walked into the event center, 4,000 people went to Hard Rock Cafe, 2,000 people went to 355, 2,000 people went to Landmark Towers, and we begin to curate packages, right, that suit those numbers. And we create infrastructure that suits the numbers of people going in different directions. And our advertising screens are adapted to those people. So, you know, it's a long play. This is not about real estate. It's about people. And one has to be quite anal about how you build that facility up and how you respond to people. You know, I was taught in business school that if you want to be a successful businessman, only 3 things you need to do, but you need to do them well, right? The first thing is you need to solve a real problem. You need to figure out a problem that everybody has and solve it. I hate niche businesses. I like mass businesses, right? Because you just have more people. And to be a mass business in Africa, then it needs to be affordable. And affordability is not $200. Affordability is under $20, right? So whether it's a kid's birthday party or a meal with a boy and a girl or an exciting activity, you need to keep it at a certain level. So I think the future is bright. It's a journey. We're opening along the West African coast as well. We're opening in Gambia, in Liberia, in Ghana, and here. So English-speaking West Africa. And we intend ultimately to join these areas by cruise ships and by air. And let's see where it goes. So we don't want Nigerians and Africans holidaying abroad. And we can bring it all here, right? And we bring it here, when we bring the foreigners here, there's simply no reason why we can't create in West Africa and in Nigeria specifically, a platform that's as good as some of the places that we've been to in the Caribbean and in Asia. Those are not countries that are that well organized. Those are not countries that are better than Nigeria. But we do need everybody to work together. And we do need an enabling environment, and we do need authenticity and transparency. And we do need a fair wind, right? And then leave the rest to us.
Enugu, Abia, and Port Harcourt. Surely, you know, people say to us, businesses of this scale that will create this many jobs, that would give government ultimately returns in terms of taxation. Government should be supporting in one way or the other, right? To create the enabling environment, right? Or in other countries, other parts of the world, when people want to put in this much investment into any kind of sector. You see the government giving them incentives like tax incentives, maybe landed property, X, Y, and Z. Surely these three states and the governments must be doing or should be doing, we expect they should be doing something to support your vision. I hope, because a lot of people, businessmen, entrepreneurs that want to go into a sector or the other, they feel like they need to know a big man, they need to know a top politician. And is this the case? Are you being helped in any way? Any kind of?
Yeah, it's on a great question and great framing as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality in varying degrees, right? So some people get this, so not everybody gets it.
Right.
But getting it is one thing from the leadership, and then the execution requires a lot more than just the leadership. It requires the entire trail of people. The 3 states you mentioned are the 3 states that we signed and we're executing.
Yeah.
And there are 5 other states that we're working towards, and we're having fairly good experiences, in those states. But I'll just pick one state and give you an example.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I went to school in Enugu, obviously. I went to university in Enugu, and I hadn't been back more or less since, right? And that was, without betraying my age, that was almost 40 years ago, so, right? But the governor called me. Didn't know him from anywhere.
Yeah.
And had seen what we'd done and said, look, he's trying to build Enugu into a destination. This MICE, meetings and centers, conferences and exhibitions, he really wanted to play on it. And you've seen what's happened in Enugu. He's trying to bring a lot of national, international, and regional conferences and things. And because it builds a city. And that level of governance tells you that you're in the right place, because so no people are going to come to the state. You know the infrastructure is going to be done, and you know there will be some element of support.
Yeah.
Now, is it
enough?
No,
maybe not.
Maybe not at this stage, right? But it will get there.
Yeah.
The first thing,
At least the mindset. The mindset is there.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is very important. Yeah.
This is all.
Yeah.
Right?
If you have the body language, the mindset, if you have those people, those 2 things, I think
80%
you're safe. Yeah.
Yes, you're 80% there. You just need to deal with the other challenges that will definitely emerge, right? And it's like when you're hiring someone, you're hiring mindset, not competence. Yeah, the mindset is right, then the competence will follow. And if you don't have it, you teach it, right? So yes, I think that we're only going to go to states that have a chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
We're not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
As I said, we don't do things because they're easy. We actually do things because they're difficult. Because in Nigeria, difficult things, actually, there's a scarcity there. You don't have as much competition.
Exactly.
And you have so much opportunity.
Everyone shies away from it.
Everybody shies away, and you have so much opportunity. So it's okay. And it's okay to fail in some of them and succeed in some. Whereas once you succeed in more than you fail in.
Right.
So, I am incredibly optimistic that we'll be successful in many, if not all, right? But we'll have a good effort, go at trying. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, speaking about succeeding, to succeed, you need a certain level of capital, right? And then there's this question that always comes up around funding. Funding is a major hurdle for developers when it comes to real estate. Funding is also a major hurdle for entrepreneurs. In your early days, how did you attract capital? What is Landmark's strategy? You don't have to reveal everything to us, but what is your strategy to raise more capital, to expand and grow? Because there are a lot of people that have great ideas. There are a lot of people that are not afraid to fail. There are a lot of people that are not afraid to take the risk, right? But there's this red tape, and that is cash, right? They don't know how to get it. And when you get it, how do you use it? How, to ensure you get to your destination? Because a lot of people have gotten capital and they burnt it, right? Because it's gone down the wrong pipe. So what is Landmark's strategy? What advice would you have for entrepreneurs, for business people who are trying to get access to capital, who funding is a major hurdle to move their business from an idea to an actual business?
So the good question, and you more or less answered that question when you said that some people have gotten the capital and haven't used it. Right. So capital is not about what you get; it's about what you use it for and how you deploy it. Yeah. Capital. Some people need 10,000 naira, and then some people need 10 billion naira. Right. But it's how you use the 10,000 or 10 billion to make it count, to multiply it in geometric proportions. Remember earlier in the conversation, I said there's 3 things you need to succeed. Yeah. So one is you need a good idea. Yeah. Right. And that solves the problems of many people. The second thing is you need to be able to execute that idea in a way nobody else can. Yeah. Right. And then, the third thing, you need to be able to scale that execution. Yeah. Right. Now, if you have those 3 things and you're a good person, and you go out there, if you knock on enough doors, you eventually get
at least one will be open.
Yes, one will be open. It won't open to the 10 billion if that's what you're looking for. It may open to 10,000, right?
Yeah. You start somewhere.
You start somewhere. Correct. So a lot of people don't want to start at the grassroots. A lot of people do their business plans, have their ideas, think that they're unique in those ideas, and they look for so much at the beginning. So it frightens people away. So my big advice would be, first of all, scale it down. Use friends and family first. The easiest way to raise capital is friends and family. The problem with friends and family is that's limited, right? You're not going to get millions and millions. You're going to get thousands, right? But use the thousands. Just show what you...
And that's a proof of concept first.
Yes. You prove your concept. You execute whatever you can in a way that nobody else can. You know, people tend to underrate brand, right? But brand is a combination of many things. It's your ability to execute, it's your integrity, it's your reliability, it's your strength, it's what the world says about you, right? And what your customers say. And if you spend a good time, well, you're in the hospitality business. You know, people do all sorts of things creating restaurants. They make it really nice and spend so much money. If the food is not good,
Food is there. The product itself.
The product itself. Absolutely, you missed it, right? So
it will catch up with you.
You know, absolutely. If you've been in a restaurant, I don't know how much it costs, but it must cost a few $100 million.
Absolutely.
Restaurant, right? But the reality is the plate of food that's 50,000 naira. If that plate of 50,000 naira food is good, then someone's going to eat it. They're going to eat it,
and they'll come back.
They'll come back. So the first advice I'll say is, whatever you do, do it extremely well. The second thing is, have principles. I'm not saying, be religious.
Principles, very important.
Just have principles. Just decide what your standards are and stay there. If you say, this is who I am, just stay there. And principles are not about convenience. Principles are things that you hold even in difficult times. It's not a character of convenience. It's a character of, this is who I am, right? And then the third thing is always put your best foot forward. People don't always... they don't always give their best, right? So they turn up to ask for money. And the reason I've met a lot of people who ask for money is because I did that reality TV show.
The journalism version of, Nigerian version.
So, I met a lot of people, and, and Nigerians are full of excitement and innovation and creativity, incredibly intelligent. They come in there, their 4-minute pitch without notes is exceptional. Another thing, I wish I was like this when I was that age, right? They're so talented, but not many people understand that your character and your ability and your self-belief actually matter. I would never invest in a side hustle. Right?
Exactly.
If you want me to put my money there, put all your trust.
All yours, all your commitment, all your money, everything.
Throw it all in, right? And when we come, we know that you need to survive, right? And we're aligned. But if you don't need to survive, then I've lost my mind, right? So I think that's the first thing you tell any entrepreneur is you need to be all in. You can't. It's not a halfway house because you're going to face incredibly challenging times, and the only way you get over those challenging times is your ability to say, "I have nowhere else to go." It's like Nigerians that have only one passport. If you're in this country, you can want to go abroad as much as you like, but this is who you are.
Exactly.
So, and you've got to make the best of it. Right. You can't rely on things you don't have. So again, to reiterate, friends and family first. And then as you prove yourself, you then move up to institutional finance. Institutional finance are in many stages. From a Landmark perspective, you asked us, what are we doing? So obviously we've just lost a lot of money and we're trying to build that back. We did a small we borrowed another set of monies. We did a small private placement to strengthen our balance sheet. I guess incredibly well subscribed with a lot of family offices and some small institutions and some individuals. And that's what we're using to roll out our expansion plan. The idea is by this time next year to do a second round to take it a stage further. And let's see. Hopefully,
would you ever put Landmark on the capital market?
So that's the idea. If not for what happened recently, we would have been.
It was going there.
It was Q1 2026.
The numbers were good.
The numbers were in the right place, right? And we had all the conversations. We were going to float in dual exchanges in both the
New York Stock Exchange,
London Stock Exchange,
London and Nigeria.
Then we're considering Joburg as well because we have South African investors too. But so that thought has been set back a few years. But we'll be back there. I travel around the world. I travel so many places, and in airports, in hotels, whether it's in London, in Singapore, in Ghana, in Kigali, in Lagos, I meet people that say, "Oh, Landmark, that's a nice thing." Right. So we know we have to do it again.
Right, exactly. Because you built the brand, right?
Yes, and we know we have to do it well.
The truth is, a lot of entrepreneurs out there, there's this fear or phobia for bringing in investors, diluting equity. And there's this phrase that's well known to a lot of people. it's better to own 10% of a large company than 100% of a tiny company, right? But a lot of entrepreneurs, because they're so into their idea, they hold on to, I want to own everything, I want to own everything. Is there any advice? What would you tell an entrepreneur? Because I know you have investors and you've had investors from the jump. And I'm one of those entrepreneurs who believes if you cannot sell your dream to someone else, it's probably a bad idea. The only reason why people haven't invested is because it's a terrible idea. If people give you money, right, it means that you're onto something, right? And it's the first signal. But a lot of entrepreneurs that want to do business feel like they need to hold on to their equity. They don't want to get people involved. Is it a right mindset? On what should they?
I wouldn't say it's the right mindset, but it's a legitimate mindset.
Okay.
Right. So I would say, look, if you want to do everything yourself and hold on to everything yourself, then it's a mom and pop business, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's small, there's medium, there's large.
Yeah.
Right. And there's extra large.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to decide where you want to play. If you want to play in small and say, this is all I want.
You're content. This is what being in it.
It's okay. Yes. My wife is a doctor, and she decided she wants to become some kind of businesswoman. Right. And so she said she will set up her own clinic, and it has 2 rooms and stuff. I mean, that's the size.
Yeah.
A lot of people will come and say, you know what, I want, a whole chain of clinics and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's not always everybody's dream. So that's why I say it's legitimate, but don't bat small and think big.
I see.
Right? Because you will die in all places.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you want to be extra, extra large, then you start your business and you think about your business in that mold, right? And you build it from ground up in that mold, not just with the governance structures, with the administrative structures, with the strategy, with the people you hire, and with your dreams, right? And you have to say, and those dreams, if you're trying to raise money, and you have to say, although I'm just going to friends and family today, I know that one day I'm going to be on a stock exchange. Yeah. And if one day you're going to be on a stock exchange, then today you need to keep your books properly. Right. And today you need to make decisions in a way that's sustainable going forward, whereas if there are other people in it. But I encourage people to do 2 things in the business. One is borrow money, no matter how small.
Yeah. Because
what you can't afford.
Give you that discipline. That discipline. That's that you're responsible for something.
It's so important.
Very. I tell people that all the time.
Borrow money. Don't borrow what you can't afford.
Yeah.
Borrow a little money.
Yeah. Very little. Start with little. You can scale it.
Yes.
Borrow, repay. Keep a good track record.
Get other investors.
Yeah.
Right. And even at the beginning, if you say, well, I want to own everything, then get someone that will own 1% or 2%, and let that person have a voice. Yeah. Right. Because it also measures you. Yeah. Because not everything you do and you say may actually work. It's all from your perspective. And then you can then decide, no, you know what, I want to stay mom and pop, or I want to grow extra large. But there's legitimacy at all ends of the scale. But just don't do one thing and pretend to be another.
So at what point do you think it's the right time to take in institutional capital? Because those guys, they come with their own weight. They get to the table, they push everything off, tell you to sit down, and you're thinking to yourself,
and the time
I'm staff now.
No, absolutely, yeah. And the type of institutional capital you take is very important.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so it has to be the right people.
Yeah, it has to be the right people, longevity-wise, sector-wise, knowledge of the market-wise. So there's just so many things.
Just don't take any money, basically.
Don't take any money. Yeah, because the biggest mistake you can make is to take any money. Yeah. And it ends up tying you down. Yeah, hold your business, and you can't pursue your dreams. So the first thing you have to do is whoever you're taking money from, they need to understand what your plans are and the business. It doesn't mean you won't adapt and you won't change as you go along, but make sure that the people who understand that that's what's going to happen, right? And make sure you're aligned with them. But I think going back to your question, what's the best time? It's a different time for everyone. Right? Yeah. But the one thing you want to do before you take institutional money is you want to set up your business in a proper governance structure. So once you know you have a governance structure that's transparent and authentic, then you're approaching where you can stake institutional money. Then the second thing you have to do is build a brand. Have your brand first. Otherwise, you sell your business for too small a value. The best people to talk to are the people that know you before you walk into the room. Right. Yeah. If they've heard the name, then
they know there's something there.
There's something there.
Yeah.
Right. If you're explaining, then it's a friends and family fund. Yeah. Right. So that's what I would.
Okay. I think that's definitely good advice. I want to speak a little bit about leadership. In my own opinion, there's a big leadership crisis in this country at all levels. Private sector, public sector to an extent, the role models that we see out there today. In your own 30 plus years of being an entrepreneur that has done business in all these different countries around the world, what are the leadership challenges that you see today in Nigeria from leaders, and then from being having to lead people within your ecosystem and within your business environment? What are the biggest challenges that you see today?
So some challenges are perception, which sometimes are bigger than real. Yeah, right. Because if there's a perception that there's insecurity, even if the place is secure, people just sort of come
mentally.
Yeah. So I would say the biggest perceptions challenge is that mindset of, am I going to be supported or am I going to be killed? Right. And I will implore anybody in leadership position, whether it's private sector or public sector, to be open to collaboration and to make sure that, you know, two people can actually win a race, right? You know, this is not a football match where there's a winner and a loser, right? It's important to have alignment. So I think the biggest challenge is alignment in leadership. The second challenge in Africa, there's a common term for it, when nepotism. Yeah. So people give chances to people who are not competent to do a job, right? Because they're their brother, their sister, their friend or something. You know, if you hire the best all the time, right? Sometimes you get it wrong and it's okay. No. And sometimes you get it right. But the problem with nepotism is that you always get substandard. You've got someone who's not as good as other people out there, right? The second thing is that person, if they have the wrong mindset, they know they're there for privilege, right? So they don't actually do the work that they're meant to do. And this is both in the private sector and the public sector. The third problem with leadership is interest, is self-interest. A lot of people make decisions because their interest is there, right? If you can make a decision as if it was a third part, objectively, and you will move the needle so many spots ahead. And then the fourth is just exposure and experience. You know, it's just so important for people in leadership positions to have exposure and experience of things before they get into it. And always feel that whoever it is you're leading, right? You're actually leading that pack, and you're not telling, right? You're not. What's the term that's used? But you know, to lead and to rule are two different things, right? And you lead by example, right? So if you tell everybody tighten your belts, then you know you need to tighten your belts, right?
You gave an example earlier when we started the conversation around you taking 140 of your team members to Dubai. That was leadership, right? And most of those guys were probably greenfields at the time. They didn't know much. They had to come understand.
Half of them had to get passports.
Exactly.
Even have passports.
Never traveled. Exactly. So I'm saying that to compare then when you did that about 10 years ago now, there is a major, in my own opinion, employment issue today in Nigeria in terms of people who are employable. So unemployment as definition is people who are willing and able to work. That's a dictionary definition of unemployment, right? In Nigeria, today, you do interviews, 10 interviews, they're struggling to get one, right? You find that somebody is willing, but not able. Somebody is able, but is just lazy. Here you have a Gen Z who just, you know, these guys. I'm still 30. They can work, but they just don't want to do it, right? Today, in the employment market and with the way Landmark is going to scale, how do you intend to lead your people to ensure that they get the concept? And are you going to keep taking people to Dubai? Where are they going to next? What is the plan to ensure that you have the right people in the right positions, considering the environment today?
No, it's a good question. You know, someone said to me, if you find ordinary people to do extraordinary things, that's success. Right? So you have to first of all start from the point that everybody's ordinary. Which means that the parts of them that need to be molded, right? But you need to make sure that you can make them do extraordinary things, right? So you spend a lot of time, different people have different attitudes and different ways of taking things on board. So I spend a lot of time talking to people, by the way, right? Both within my organization and outside the organization. And sometimes it's boring. I can imagine they say, oh gosh, here it comes again. When I call people into my office, oh gosh. You know what? But, I think it's important just to share your experiences, right? I would have called it wisdom, but I'm talking about myself. Because some of it may be right, some of it may not be right, but at least the experiences I can learn from.
It's real life.
Yeah, it's real life. I always say to people, an experience is not something that you have to go through, especially when it's bad, right? You can learn it from other people.
Correct.
Right? There's just no need. So who hasn't been there before?
You don't have to.
You don't have to
experience the same thing.
Experience the same.
Avoid it.
Avoid it, absolutely. But it's very hard to tell young people to avoid it, right? Because they're thinking, I'm missing out on something.
Yeah.
And until they run into trouble, then that's when they learn the lesson, right? Now, there is the top 10%. And that, again, there's something I speak about a lot. I call it the balance theory. And basically, to be in the top 1% in the world, we're going to have to sacrifice, right? And I defy anybody to tell me anybody who's gone into the top 1%, whether it's an athlete, a musician, a businessman, a politician, that hasn't sacrificed immensely, right? Now, so your ability to sacrifice will determine where you want to go.
Correct.
So the first thing I look for when I'm employing people is, are they prepared to sacrifice? If you want to stay in a comfort zone, you're in politics, right? Because it doesn't mean it will work for you, but I'm taking a risk that I don't need to take, right?
And you can always tell in the early days. You don't need to work for you for 6 months to know if someone is willing to go.
6 days,
Exactly.
absolutely, absolutely. So as I said earlier, aptitude is everything. I didn't necessarily employ because of competence or because of knowledge or experience. If you have the right mindset, and you go somewhere. And then, long-termism. The reason why Nigeria is how it is today is because of the short-term mindsets across the board, from people who say, well, I'm not going to continue going to school, my friends making money, and from some of the leaders who just feel, let's just do something for the next election, as opposed to something that's sustainable long term.
For the next 20, 30 years.
So the next 20, 30 years. That's how Singapore was built. That's how Dubai was built. I was privileged to attend a conference once, very short, quick story, in Dubai. And Sheikh Mo, they call him Sheikh Mohammed, the leader of it. Right? He said when he came back from Europe and his father said to him, you're going to be taken over. His father said, I have one dream, right? I want you to build a new port, right? And he looked at his father and he thought, why? First of all, we have the largest port in the Arab world and Southeast Asia, right? It's only 50% utilized. And you want us to borrow $400 billion from the Americans to build a port. Why? And his father said to him, because when you need it, you will be able to afford it, right? So the strategies you're going to adopt to make this country successful, the port is central to that.
It's number one.
Is number one, right? So he went with blind loyalty and did that. They borrowed the money and built it. And then Dubai, so they built the port, then they built the airport, then they built the links, because they figured out that within 3/4 of the world's population is within an 8-hour flight from Dubai. And before, what were people doing? People were taking long-distance flights from Europe across into Asia, right? Nobody wanted to come to Arab land, right? They didn't want to go to Dubai, but they were going across and they never stopped, right? So he said, I want to land those planes here. And I want to stop the ships here. I don't want the ships just going across. I don't want the planes going across. So he did that infrastructure and everybody stopped. Initially, it was just in the airport for 1 hour, right? Then you give them things to do. You bring people here, then keep them here, right? You give them things to do, they stay for 1 day, right? If they stay for 1 day, the next time is 1 week. And before you know, people are like, I like this place, I'm going to stay for a month. And that's how they built that place. Every single time I go, I'm just amazed at the transition. Singapore's job was harder, by the way, because it's off center. But 30 years ago, it was a fisherman's village, right? But leadership took that place in 30 years to the number 1 city in the world, right? Remember when the Malaysians didn't even want them? I mean, they were trying to stay with Malaysia and they were actually kicked out. Singaporeans were not accepted anywhere. They were the world's mafia, right? A passport couldn't get you in 10 countries. But now it's the number 1 passport in the world. It's the number 1 place to go to. And it has the best systems in the world. So that's all about leadership. It's how do you create things that everybody wants to come to? But you have to think long term. You can't do it short term. That's the truth. So anything you think, I'm just going to do this tomorrow and I need my money the next, it's not going to work.
And that brings me to the next question around leadership in public life. There are 2 types of businessmen in this country. There are the businessmen, like you and I, who want to focus on the core of their business, build it, scale it out, employ, contribute as much as they can to society. And there are some who don't believe it's enough and they want to go into the public space to take charge. and do exactly what you've said. Plan for the long term, right? Because like someone said to me the other day, he said, this guy coming into office for 4 years, right? Your business is not a 4-year business. You are in this business for 40 years. Now you have a guy who's leading you for 4 years. It's important that you are involved in who's taking those positions. But people go a step further, including myself. 2022, that I decided to go into public space, and I attempted an election. Is it possible to do it when you're not on the table? Can you make this big enough change, or is it a requirement that you go into public sector and also make your own contributions? And are you going to at any point attempt to go into public life?
So of course you can do it off the table or on the table. Obviously, it's easy to do it on the table when you count, right? And Nigeria is still developing its governance and its influence. But if you look around the world, the people who have changed the world, have never put on a political hat, right? And the politicians that people talk about the most are actually not the most successful ones. The successful ones are the ones you don't hear about, right? You just see their country. Yeah. People say Norway is a great country. Singapore is a great country. 90% of people on earth.
You've never heard them.
Never heard them, right? So you can do it either way, right? And I do feel that generally the best, this is a risk I'm taking here, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? The best leaders, as in on the government side, are the ones who have been in the private sector and intend to go back to the private sector.
Yeah.
So that 4 years is actually not 4 years.
They have a second address.
So, they want to prepare the country and the place and the city and
go back to the
repair place, right?
Right. So that's a 40-year journey anyway.
Yeah.
And if you have a lot of those people who have experienced and been successful in the private sector and they go into leadership, they will do the right thing because they're going back to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how you get your 40 years.
Yeah.
I applaud people like you. I'm not brave enough. So the last question is, will I do politics? I couldn't. I just wouldn't. I never would. As a matter of fact, if you see me
appointed, elected, you won't do any?
I wouldn't do any.
I know you've been offered a ministerial position before in the past.
I wouldn't do any. I wouldn't do any. I will chair a board. And even as a government entity or stuff, I just feel that my calling is in the private sector. And I do want to make a difference, and I want to make a significant difference, and I feel I can do that where I am. I will find it very hard to be in a political space and exert the same influence. I'm not brave enough. Because it does change you. It does require a lot from you, and whatever business you're running, we need to park it. Right?
Yeah.
It's a tough one. When I see people, especially young people like you, energetic, incredibly successful in the private sector, putting all that aside and saying, you know what, I want to make the change I want to see. It's incredibly brave. I think more people need to do it, and hopefully on this your series, you'll find a way to encourage people.
Yeah.
To make that leap.
Yeah, I mean, I sat down with a politician once, and he told me when I said to him, "This is what I want to do. I want to go in. Let me see what I can fix, and I can come back out." And he said to me, "Well, you go in, but you're going to lose one of three things, and if you're unlucky, you lose all the three. You're going to lose your peace of mind, you're going to lose your health, and you're going to lose your family. Some people lose all three." So you
fourth, your business, left your head,
and the business, right? And you decide, right? But like you said, it's sacrifice.
It's sacrifice.
At the end of the day, someone has to do it. You have to sacrifice, to make a difference. Well, this has been very exciting. I've learned a lot from this conversation as well. I'm going to take all these nuggets and put it together for our own next decade vision. The people out there, the entrepreneurs, the business people who want to come back to Nigeria, the ones that are in Nigeria, I want a success story. I don't want to hear from you. I'm sure you have a message for them. What would you like to say to the people, the young people, the people who have failed before, the people who are currently struggling, young business people, the Gen Zs, the Gen X, the young professionals? We just want you to give us a message to the people.
All right, thank you. It's a tough one, but I think in threes. So I'm going to say three things. on 3 principles. So, the first thing I'll say is, I have 3 sayings on my wall in the office, and they effectively reflect the things that are important to me. So the first thing I'll say is, if you want to succeed in life, you have to help people around you succeed, right? So you're not alone in the world, right? And you will face some trials, you face some tribulations, you face the good and the bad, the hot and the cold, but you need to find a way to get around it, right? So help people around you. If you want to be happy, people around you have to be. The second thing I'll say is everybody has a good idea. So we know we're full of good ideas and we think it's the best idea in the world. I'm like that and self-confessed. But the truth is everybody has a good idea. What differentiates you is your ability to execute on that idea in a way nobody else can. And the third thing I want to say is, I've talked a lot about sacrifice in this conversation, is, it's FDR, the founder, Franklin Roosevelt, American president, said it. If you want something you've never had, you've got to be prepared to do something you've never done. You don't get things for free, right? You've got to grind for it. The only 3 things that matter, or 3 sets of people that matter when you're trying to start a business and you're trying to run your life. You're one of them. The second are the people you know. But never forget the third set, the people you don't know, right? So whether you're building a road, you do it properly. You're writing a program, do it in a way that helps everybody. You're making food, do it in a way that's less sufficient, but do your best all the time, every time. So the last thing I will say is everybody in life waits for opportunity. So everybody in life waits for opportunity. And a lot of people say, you know what, I'll come back when my family is ready, or when Nigeria is better, or when the interest rates are down, or when the foreign exchange number gets to 1,000 or 2,000. So people always use reasons to figure out where they want to do things when the opportunity is there. And I say this a lot of my speeches. I say, look, the opportunity of a lifetime can only be realized in the lifetime of that opportunity. If you wait until things are perfect and you go back, that same opportunity is not there, it's moved. I don't know whether you read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Right? I mean, it's one of those defining books. Who Moved My Cheese? Well, the cheese moves. So you go back to that opportunity, the cheese is not in the same place, right? And you think it is, and you'd wonder why it never worked. So remember that the opportunity of a lifetime can only be realized in the lifetime of the opportunity. So you're exactly where you want to be to make the change you want to see.
Thank you so much. And I guess that brings us to the end of this conversation. It was lovely having a conversation with you. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to being your tenants in Enugu, Port Harcourt. I was actually in Enugu before. I had a restaurant there. But then again, like you said, leadership. The leaders, the government at the time was so unserious. The place was very unsafe. And the business just wasn't good. And it was actually in a mall, a nicely curated mall and all that. But it didn't work out, right? By Independence layout. And we all suffered. As investors, we all suffered. But we're looking forward to making that return in a more conducive.
And it is one of the top 10 states in the country.
Yes, I agree.
Because say they have a shout to be the best very soon.
Yeah, they have very focused leadership. I can tell you that, and we're quite excited. Conversation with giants. Hopefully, we'll have more conversations with you in the future. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being a client. Thanks for being a friend. And I look forward to seeing you in Enugu.
So Tola, welcome to the 12th floor. Happy birthday. Wishing you the absolute very best. You've achieved so much in the past. And if your next 40 years can be like your last 40 years, you will change the world. So happy birthday. Blessings, great health, prosperity, and strength to make a difference. I'm Paul Onwuanibe, the founder, chief executive of Landmark, and keep watching NoireTV.
NoireTV, showing on Verizon Fios, channel 269, Optimum channel 1100, and on Digicel. Or on our website, www.noiretv.com, or download the app from the App Store or Play Store.